Trump says Greenland matters to America. Fine. But here's where this gets ugly. Greenland says an American oil company didn't have permission and equipment still showed up anyway. So tonight, forget the slogans and forget the partisan spin. The real question is much simpler. When Greenland says no, why does it suddenly sound like America hears not yet?
A national ban on all future oil exploration. Nevertheless, after Trump got elected to go back and serve a second term as president in the United States, and he started talking about forcibly taking over Greenland for some reason, a new company formed in Texas called Greenland Energy. That's not Greenland, Texas. It's Greenland as in Greenland. And Greenland Energy said they were going to drill for oil in Greenland. In June, a representative from Greenland Energy turned up in Greenland, in the part of the untouched Arctic, no roads, eastern Greenland, where these guys want to drill. And they announced to the villagers there that this company, this Texas company, had permission. They announced that they have permission.
I'm not going to open this one by talking about Trump. I want to start somewhere more basic than that, because I think the basic part is where people are getting lost. Here's the question. Can an American company just decide that a foreign government's permit is a formality? Not a requirement. A formality. Something you handle on the way, not something you wait for. That's what's happening in eastern Greenland right now, and I want to be careful with the language, because words matter here. I'm not ready to call a pile of shipping containers an invasion. That's a big word, and big words get thrown around too easily in this business. But I am absolutely ready to ask why the word no suddenly seems negotiable to a Texas oil company operating 8,000 miles from home.
They had secured the legal right to start bringing their equipment, their oil drilling equipment, to this untouched Arctic area of Greenland. After those remarks in eastern Greenland, the company later apologized and said, actually, they didn't have permits to do that. They put out a statement sort of correcting the record saying, quote, our enthusiasm for the project led us to communicate in a way that created confusion. So forget we said that. What really created confusion locally was when this happened. This is a picture of a tugboat bringing in a barge to that area of eastern Greenland. And the barge appears to contain about 12 or 15 shipping containers worth of stuff. These photos were obtained by a Danish investigative outlet called Danwatch. They show this tugboat and this barge arriving full, totally loaded, on the night of Wednesday, July 29th. Then,
walk through the timeline with me. A company called Greenland Energy tells residents in a remote hamlet, through an interpreter, that it already has permission to bring in equipment. Greenland's own government says that's not true. Weeks later, the company's leadership walks it back, more or less saying, our enthusiasm got ahead of our accuracy. And then, despite all of that, a tugboat shows up anyway, with containers and heavy machinery, and starts unloading. That's not a rumor. That's the sequence. Now flip the scenario. Imagine a Chinese energy company showing up on the Alaskan coast, telling a small town it had federal permission, getting corrected by Washington, apologizing for the confusion, and then unloading equipment anyway while the correction was still fresh. Nobody in this country would call that enthusiasm. We'd call it a provocation.
the same tugboat and the same barge are seen leaving that same place the next morning, except this time empty. Because all of those shipping containers, all of that equipment that was on the barge heading in, they apparently left all that stuff on land. Now, the government in Greenland had said explicitly that this American oil company didn't have, quote, permission to unload anything at all, to unload anything whatsoever in Greenland. In fact, before the pictures were published showing that tugboat and barge leaving empty after apparently dropping off all that material, the minister in charge of mineral resources from the Greenland government did a local interview in Greenland in which he said he was sure, he was absolutely sure, this American oil company would never break the law and try to start this drilling project without permission. Quote, should that happen, Greenland has the means to stop.
We'd have congressional hearings about it by Friday. You don't have to like Rachel Maddow to sit with that comparison. You don't have to watch her show, agree with her politics, or care one bit about Arctic oil reserves. Strip all of that away, and you're left with one plain question. Did they have permission or didn't they? And if they didn't, why does the behavior on the ground look exactly like a company that assumed the answer would eventually come around to yes?
Their actions. He said, quote, this is a society governed by the rule of law. So I have some broad-shouldered men in black uniforms in the first instance who can help me deal with some illegal activities if I ask for them. By which he means, I think, the Greenlandic police. Then he said, quote, ultimately, I'm sure that the Arctic Command will also contribute. By which he means the Danish military, he believes, would also intervene to stop this American oil company from trying to drill for oil in Greenland without any permission to do so. So that's what Greenland's government had to say. It turns out on the day this American company, unbeknownst to them, had just that morning dropped off more than a dozen shipping containers full of equipment to get started on their oil drilling operation in Greenland. The American company said they had permission to move in the equipment. Then they kind of apologized for that and admitted that they didn't have the permission.
Think about what that looks like from the other side, from a hamlet of a few hundred people watching heavy equipment arrive by barge, while their own government is publicly saying it never approved this. These are small communities. Remote, self-sufficient. I'm not going to romanticize Greenland or pretend it's some untouched paradise being violated. What I will say is that small populations don't lose their right to be asked just because they're small. Sovereignty only means something when the answer no actually means no.
But then on the same day, the Greenland government said they wouldn't dare. We'll use our police. We'll use the Danish military to stop them if we need to. That same day, they turn out to have unloaded their drilling stuff anyway. They're just going ahead with it, even though the local government says no, which led to headlines like this in Greenland. This is the Google Translate from the original, which I can't pronounce. I'll just give you the English language Google translation. Oil company moves equipment to eastern Greenland without permission. That hullabaloo also led to pledges from local hunters and trappers in the area that they would physically themselves block the oil company from trying to land anything else or anyone else on shore.
That's the whole block. Hold on to that, because it gets stranger from here, because the company and the government aren't just disagreeing about permits. They're describing two completely different realities. This one's more about paperwork than shipping containers, and I know paperwork doesn't make for great television. Stick with me anyway, because this is where the real story usually hides. Picture two screens side by side. On one screen, you've got Greenland Energy's public messaging constructive meetings, encouraging progress, a company that sounds like it's weeks away from breaking ground. On the other screen, you've got Greenland's Ministry of Mineral Resources saying the permits aren't coming this year. Not delayed. Not in review.
It led to the Greenland government issuing a formal warning to this oil company over what it's apparently trying to do in contravention of local law. That apparently prompted U.S. President Donald Trump to post this online, showing a giant, snarling version of himself looming over and menacing Greenland. Hello, Greenland. A few days ago, this Trump-aligned oil company in Texas sent a cheery, all-smiles letter to its shareholders, bragging about how great their talks are going with the Greenland government. Recent high-level meetings between project leadership and Greenlandic regulatory and oversight authorities have been constructive, and we continue to be encouraged by the progress being made toward the remaining approvals required for drilling. Everything's going great. Greenland government really wants us to do this. Our talks are really constructive. Turns out that is not at all how Greenland sees it. Headline in the local news: Greenland Department of Resources to controversial U.S. oil company, forget test drilling this year.
I'm not going to sit here and call this fraud. I have no evidence investors were deliberately misled, and I'm not in the business of manufacturing scandals. But I've been around long enough to know that we're making excellent progress can mean almost anything in corporate America. Sometimes it means real progress. Sometimes it means we're still hopeful. Sometimes it just means the quarterly letter needs a sentence that doesn't scare the shareholders. And here's where this story gets even more interesting. After all that confidence, the company's own regulatory posture changed. The permitting process, which investors had been told was on track, got handed off to a joint venture partner, with the timeline pushed out toward a target somewhere in 2027. That's not a rounding error. That's a company that was projecting momentum it apparently didn't have. So who was the confident messaging actually for? Investors, who need a reason to stay in. Local officials, who they were hoping to bring along. Political allies back home who liked the optics of American energy independence. Or just a company trying to keep enthusiasm alive around a project that was hitting walls it didn't want to advertise.
Last week, the oil company Greenland Energy Company issued a letter to its shareholders that painted a rosy picture of the future prospects for the project in northeast Greenland. In the letter, the company states that its drilling project is progressing rapidly and its management expects to be able to begin drilling before the end of the year. But if you ask decision makers in this country, such as the Minister of Foreign Affairs or the head of the Trade and Minerals Department in the Greenlandic government, according to them, there is no earthly chance of that happening. So you put all this together, this Trump-aligned oil company based in Texas saying, we're going to drill for oil in Greenland. Greenland saying, oh, no, you're not. The company going ahead and dropping off their drilling stuff anyway. Local residents saying, we'll fight tooth and nail. Local government saying, we'll use the police, we'll use the Danish military. You put it all together, kind of seems like we're invading Greenland.
I don't know the answer. I don't think anyone outside that boardroom knows the full answer. What I do know is this. When a company operates in a place as politically sensitive as Greenland right now, with a U.S. president who's spent the better part of a year talking about acquiring the island, the obligation to be precise about what you actually have goes up, not down. Corporate spin in a normal business deal is background noise. Corporate spin about a foreign territory the president has openly discussed annexing is something else entirely. The containers are visible. Anyone can point a camera at them.
I mean, this company has somehow hornswoggled itself into a partnership with Dr. Phil to make what sure looks like propaganda TV shows about this heroic and exciting oil drilling project, which the government of Greenland says is illegal and they don't have permission to do it. This Trump-adjacent brand new oil company funded in large part by a major Trump billionaire donor. They sometimes admit that they have no permission to be doing what they're doing in Greenland, but they've still gone ahead with it anyway. In addition to the 12 or 15 shipping containers that arrived in the last couple of weeks, that they parked on shore in the last couple of weeks, while the Greenland government was threatening that their police or the Danish military should stop that if they tried it, in addition to those 12 or 15 shipping containers, the same oil company now says it's shipping 300 more shipping containers and a whole huge drilling rig that they plan to get there in the next month.
I am not going to tell you the President of the United States picked up a phone and told a Texas oil company to go land containers in Greenland without a permit. I have no evidence of that, and I'm not going to manufacture a connection that isn't there. But you don't need an operational link to recognize a political one. And the political one here is impossible to miss. Trump has spent the better part of a year putting Greenland at the center of an extraordinary national conversation about acquisition, control, and American security interests. Once you've done that, once the President of the United States has repeatedly floated the idea that America should simply own this island, an American company with board members connected to Trump's political and defense contracting circle doesn't get to operate there as just another energy company.
So, honestly, is this how we invade Greenland? With Dr. Phil doing a ride-along like he did with ICE? All because a Trump donor billionaire says he needs to drill this oil, and who cares what this little country says? And by the way, wouldn't I like to help promote Dr. Phil's TV show about this? The nearest towns to where this is happening, and in fact towns all over Greenland, have been protesting ever since it emerged that this is the way this is going to go down. For the closest locals, I kid you not, the local musk ox hunters are saying that they may use their dinghies, their hunting boats, to blockade the fjord. They'll use anything they can get their hands off to fight off this oil company if it really does try to set up on their coast.
A president doesn't have to sign an order for his words to change the environment. That's the idea I want you to sit with. Markets listen to presidential rhetoric. Companies listen. Foreign governments listen. Allies listen. And so do the people actually living on the ground in these places. When a president talks repeatedly about American control of a specific territory, a company operating there can read that as political tailwind without ever getting a memo telling it so. And a Greenlandic villager watching American equipment roll off a barge can read the exact same signal as something much bigger than a permitting dispute.
This weekend in Denmark, which controls Greenland and defends it, residents of Copenhagen formed a kayak flotilla around the city of Copenhagen, all carrying Greenland flags. Their way of peacefully protesting against the United States of America menacing Greenland in this way. Donald Trump's war in Iran is a disaster. The only outcome of it thus far that's measurable is thousands of people dead. Iran in control of the Strait of Hormuz. We're basically out of anti-aircraft and long-range munitions, and to no effect because we've still lost this war. Losing this war handily shows adversaries like Russia and China just how long we can go in a war before we start running out of the munitions we need to be able to sustain.
Trump may believe pressure creates leverage. In some deals, maybe it does. But in international relations, pressure applied without consent has a way of turning a potential partner into a permanent skeptic. If America genuinely wants influence in Greenland, acting like Greenland doesn't get a vote in its own future may be the fastest way to lose that influence for good. Great powers don't need to behave like trespassers.